I fundamentally know that what I have learnt over my years of being around on this earth, I have something to share, and my story is worth telling.
Welcome to the MyBusiness Podcast, where we sit down with local businesses and we talk about who they are, where they come from, and what inspires them to be in business.
Well, welcome back everyone to the MyBusiness Podcast. Today I have the pleasure in introducing you to Joanne Brooks, who's an entrepreneur, a wife, a mother, and an authentic businesswoman. Joanne, this is the first of a 3-part series, and welcome to the Podfly Studios.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited. I love doing this type of interaction. It's lovely to actually sit without a screen between us, right?
Isn't it crazy?
How good is that?
We got used to it, didn't we, over a period of time, and now a lot of people still want to go that way, but nothing like face-to-face.
This is great.
So today is the first part of a 3-part series with you. Now, today is all about your story, how Joanne Brooks got to be where she is today.
Sure.
So let's go back to the start. How did it all start for Joanne?
Well, I was a very different person, and I'm going to go back a long way to when I was 18, so this is 40-odd years ago. Yep. I graduated out of the local high school here on the Gold Coast, always wanted to go to university.
Yep.
And in those days, because that was in 1980, there was one road that went to Brisbane and there was no universities.
Yep.
And my dad didn't give me the option to go to university. It was a no. For various reasons. Yeah. And in those days, well, I did what Dad asked. And I was a very quiet and very shy young woman. And so he said to me, you need to go and sit the bank exams. And so that's what we did. You know, they were always on a Saturday. So all the major banks plus one of the others on the Gold Coast, I sat the bank exam. I went, great, I'll just sit and wait now. And he went, no, now you'll ring every branch manager until you get a job. And you've got 2 weeks to do it.
Wow.
And so, context me, I spent most of my childhood playing in a cupboard. Very quiet, very shy, wouldn't proactively go and talk to somebody at all. But I did that. I picked up the phone, absolutely mortifying. That's the ultimate sell job. What am I selling?
Exactly, and especially at that age.
I'm just ready and waiting.
Yeah.
I have no skills.
Well, none that
I thought I had.
Had plenty, but...
Yeah, indeed. And I did get a job in 2 weeks, and the branch manager said something to me that it's literally only something I reflected on within the last 18 months. So it's taken me a long time to think this one through. And he said to me, you didn't get the best results, but you rang the phone consistently and you turned up, so I gave you a job. And I went, wow. And so I was sharing this story with somebody yesterday on a conversation to say, in the last 18 months, there's been a lot of change and shift in my life and my business. And I was doing the deep reflecting, getting the notepad out, what worked for me, what hasn't. And I actually went all the way back to that time. And I realised that created a pattern of behaviour for me. So I was in the bank for 17 years. I started off as simple clerk through to writing commercial finance in Brisbane City. Yep. And I was one of the very few females in that space, writing commercial transactions and how to fund paint on the walls.
Yep.
That's asset finance. Yep. And I can remember being the only female in a whole room of men, and you would think that'd be pretty intimidating. But by that point, I'd built a lot of confidence. So I ended up teaching people, bankers, how to write the finance, how to do it.
So in the 90s, it would have been groundbreaking, because I was actually in the banking system in the 90s as well. So I know that it would have been something very different for the men to have to encounter.
Be confronted with almost, yeah.
So how did you get through that? How did you win their confidence?
Well, I shared with you just previously, I can remember many times men using this precise term. What do you know, girlie? I'd be standing up in front of them teaching, and luckily I could go, a wad of paper in my hand and go, these are the transactions that I've processed and got approved. If you can do that, you don't need to be here. If you can't do that, you need to sit, stay, listen, and I will share with you how to do these transactions. And there would be a few that would leave.
Yep.
Go forth and prosper.
See you later, yeah.
But by that point, I'd had numerous years in the bank, in finance industry, and I'd built the confidence to know that the craft that I'd created, I knew what to do. And what I realised in this reflection piece, just 18 months, as I said, over the last 18 months, what I realised that incident with my dad, what that created for me was I was the first to put my hand up for every promotion. If I wanted a pay rise, I'd write a business case and I would present it to the boss and I would give him an argument as to this is what I've done, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I want. I'm prepared to negotiate it at this level. What do you think? And about 99% of the time I achieved success in that. Now, did I always get the pay rise I wanted? No. But it could be, well, let's do it at this level, Joanne. In 6 months' time, we'll revisit it. I was cool with that.
Yep.
With any negotiation, you go in high with an expectation you're
yeah.
going to negotiate down and meet in the middle somewhere.
Yep.
And I realised, as I said in the last 18 months, that that's a pattern that I'd unconsciously developed. And, you know, when I started my own business, there was lots of knockbacks and problems and challenges and highs and lows. But I fundamentally believe that that lesson back at 18 is something that created a core value in me. If I needed or wanted something, the only person who can get that is me.
Is you. So you also had a lot of, I guess the word I'm looking for is speed bumps over the way.
Yeah, indeed.
During your early life.
Mm.
Did you want to expand on those kind of things?
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I think it shows how resilient you are to be the person I'm sitting with today.
Yeah, it certainly shaped me. That is no doubt about it. As I shared with you, a book that I'm writing about myself, my story, is called The Girl in the Cupboard, deliberately so. At age 38, I'd been married for a while, 17 years, had a 4-year-old daughter, and I got a knock on the door where I worked at the time in a finance broker's, and there was 2 policemen, and they said, "Are you the wife of Brad Ashton?" And I went, "Yep." And they said, "I'm really sorry to tell you he's been killed in a car accident," which was traumatic enough. But the next question was, "But where's your daughter?" And that's terrifying, utterly terrifying. Thank goodness she was at daycare. But why they asked was, terribly, he'd driven his car straight into a semi-trailer and had burst into flames up in Brisbane. Now, that in itself will shift and change somebody. But the next day I get a phone call from a doctor that I have no idea who he is, and he says to me, "I need to speak to Brad." I said, "Well, bad timing. You should have rung 48 hours ago because he's not here anymore. You need to come and see me immediately." I went, "No, this is not the place for me to do that. Speak to my doctor, and if he needs to share something with me, he can." He came and saw me that afternoon and he said, "Brad had been diagnosed with HIV positive.
Wow.
And we need to test you immediately, you and your daughter." So, you know, trauma upon trauma and layer of trauma. And that Monday at 7 a.m, I am literally sitting on my daughter as a 5-year-old, to get blood out of her arm. And to this day, she's now 26. She has a absolute fear of needles. I get that. It's terrible.
I understand that one.
Yeah, it was horrendous. It was really unbelievably traumatic. And thankfully we were all negative, so there was no dramas there. But I remember after the funeral, my brother-in-law came up to me and he said, "You look really relieved, Joanne, actually." And I went, "Yeah, I am." Because what I hadn't shared and kept a secret for a long time was a very abusive relationship. And he said, adding trauma, he said, "You can't actually tell anybody about what his diagnosis was. You cannot tell anybody ever." And the quiet Joanne that I was capitulated and said, "Yeah, okay." And so that's a regret of my forever now. My dad is now passed and he never knew this. My mum does now. And clearly I'm talking about it now.
Yeah, of course.
But it was to protect other family members, and it was actually to protect his business reputation. He felt in his mind it was going to cause a problem for him.
But these things coming one after the other.
Within a week.
You know,
within a week.
That would make the most, you know, some of the strongest people wilt under that pressure. And here you are, a quiet girl in a cupboard.
Yes.
And you're dealing with all these things while still in that protective mode of your daughter as well.
Exactly. And, you know, I remember I only took 2 weeks off after this event because I just needed to get busy.
Yep.
I needed to get busy and I needed to focus on Nicole. I always remember, bless his heart, the man who owned the business that I worked for, and he's still a good friend and mentor to me. It was a finance broker's business and we were in an open office, and I got back to the office and he had put me in the furthest office away with a door on it and said, "Joanne, that's where you can hang out. If you need to close the door, you can." Yep. bless his heart, but that's the worst thing he could have done.
Yep.
And, I eventually got back into the office. But it's interesting, the perception of what you need when you're in a grieving situation, people just don't know how to react at all. And it was interesting. That was a tough time. But a year later, I've moved house. I'm building a new home, determined not to come back to the Gold Coast, which is we are today, because all my family wanted me to move back, and I was living in Brisbane then, and I was renting a place, and my daughter was outside playing with the dog, and there's a fella next door building a trench. He's a landscaper, and she fell in it, and he picks her up and dusts her off. She's fine. She comes in. I said, so be careful. You don't know this man. She said, no, that's Paul. I have been married to him for 17 years.
Oh, get out. Well, I did not know that bit, so that's a surprise to me. So what a twist of fate, isn't it?
I know. And I struggled with this such a quick, literally 12 months later, but he has been my absolute saviour, and he's been a wonderful dad to Nicole. So we are very happily married. Yep,
and so it just shows that, you go through what you go through, and people say it all the time, it happens for a reason.
Oh, absolutely. I genuinely believe that. My husband was he was not a happy man. He was not emotionally stable. Yep. And I think this was, as horrendous as his end was, he's in a better place. I know that. Yep. And my husband and Paul and I have had a wonderful life together, and we've been through some challenges with businesses as well. Yep. And, it took me probably about 12 to 18 months to counselling and helping and settling and getting married and buying new houses and all that stuff. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to start a business.
Okay, so I love numbers. I was doing the math. So you're in your mid-30s.
I am.
You've finished a career in the bank. You've gone through some real personal trauma, not once, not twice, but 3 times in such a period of time. How does the girl in the cupboard then become the person we are now that runs multiple businesses? Yep. I've seen the websites. I know what your passion is, and I love it.
Thank you.
How does that happen?
Well, you know what? The day that I was confronted by my brother-in-law at 38, it was like the proverbial slap across the back of the head. And it was, all right, I've got to change. What I've experienced in the past has not worked for me, so why would I keep doing that, right?
Yep.
And the first action I took to stand my ground was to stay in Brisbane and not move to the Gold Coast, because Nicole was about to start school, all that sort of things. And I went, no, I'm going to build my own home how I want it, and I'm going to put her into school, and I'm not moving.
Yep.
And so it was literally this absolute jolt that said, you need to look after you. Hey, there's a lesson that I seem to remember, and look after Nicole. So when I decided to start my business, I often speak about this today, in that I genuinely believe I started my business for ultimately the wrong reason. It is a great reason to start a business for a better life for your family, for your children, etc. But the main reason I was spouting about was lots of time, lots of money, lots of flexibility.
Yep.
What a load of garbage that is.
Didn't quite work that way.
No, I became busier and busier. And I wanted to stop. I would drop her off at daycare at 6 a.m. from a very young age, from 12 months old, and I would not pick her up until 6. She had a longer business day than I did.
Yep.
And it's exhausting for a child, let alone then you've got to get them home, you've got to get them up early, all those things, right? So I thought, well, this will give her a better experience of life, and I'll be able to watch the things that she does, all those sort of things. And that did enable me to do that. But I'm the first to admit that I entered business ownership, and I've been speaking to business owners for years, doing commercial lending, business plans. How are you going to do this? What's your cash flow look like? I did absolutely none of that. First to admit it, happy to admit it.
Isn't it funny how we tend to overlook the things that we try and instill in others?
I know.
And I've seen that in past incarnations of my working life as well. It is strange that we do that.
And I'm not going to say it's naive. I'm going to say it was ego got in my way.
Overconfidence. Yeah,
overconfidence. Like I often say to people, leave the ego at the door. Just bring that confidence forward, but know that there's a fine line between the two, right? So for me, thank goodness, I mentioned this mentor that I've had for years, and he, I was working for him, put me in the back office. He actually gave me a slap across the back of the head and said, Joanne, what are you doing?
Yep.
And thank goodness he did. because it was another jolt. I went, man, you're right, I'm not doing this right. I need to have a plan, have a strategy, all that. And I had lots of great opportunities come my way, which I was able to take advantage of. So, the first business was a simple little business teaching people how to write commercial finance and so on. I got asked to write some qualifications in the finance sector, did that. That organisation came to me and said, so we've been so successful in these programs you've written. Do you know somebody who'd like to be one of our first franchisees? I went, well, I don't know somebody, but I will do it. Thank you very much. Yep. So I took over the Queensland division as the first franchisee of this company and helped him to grow it to a substantial business over about 8 years, brought on more franchisees, helped him with all the systems, because it was something I was deeply passionate about. It was in the finance sector. I was teaching people and they were getting formal qualifications. So successful, I introduced him to a large public company who was in recruitment and they bought him out.
Yep.
And so 18 months later, that company goes, oh, man, that really wasn't a good decision. We're just going to close them all. So the contracts we had were such that we had no ability to fight it. So the franchisees, 8 of us, we all lost our businesses. So about a $2 million business. So I went, all right, well, that's interesting. I'll just start again. So that franchise had a number in it. So my business had a number +1, which was F you, I'm just going to do it better.
Yep.
With that approach. Went and bought an RTO, went and started again. 18 months later, about 2-3 years later, I got a letter in the mail from a multinational company. I'd done the right thing and registered my company name on the trademark register, and it was going through the process. And this company I got a letter from saying, you have the same name and we are either going to shut you down or you have to change your business name. It was my business was the exact same name as them. And nobody knew this. Nobody had heard of it. It was an internal company they used for training administration stuff. Still both doing education, same business name. And today I would fight tooth and nail for my brand. I get that now. But I went,
oops, yeah.
And I went back and said, can you give me 60 days? I was in a position financially to go and pay an amazing company in Brisbane called Deus. They still exist today, and they rebranded my company to a brand that was a made-up name, and I knew I would never have an issue with trademark ever again. It was a company called Entamio, E-N-T-A-M-I-O. It meant creating entrepreneurial training to acumen and mastery to the individual and organisation. So it was every letter, and it created this beautiful message.
Yep.
And that is the business that a lot of people think I created an overnight success. I built it to 30 million in about 24 months.
Yep. Wow.
But, overnight successes are a bit of BS in my mind, unless it's an absolute fluke. I'd had 25 years.
I was going to say an overnight success that took 25 years.
25 years of challenges and, all these things, highs and lows, to get to this point. So it was an organisation that I partnered with some of my largest competitors in the country. We were all training organisations. I didn't have the funding, but I was able to. I was like the little orange speedboat, and they were a bit like the Queen Mary or something. They can do big things, but they can't stop and change and pivot easily. So I knocked on their door and built an amazing team from 6 to 110, from zero turnover to 30 million in 2 years, 4 offices, and we did it with as much automation as we possibly could, because I knew the only way to scale is to partner with people who have something that I can fill their gap. So I knocked on their door and said, I want your funding. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to do it. I have the same license as you, so I understand the rules and regulations of being an RTO. And they went, oh, wow, that's different. You're going to fill a gap that we don't have. And so what I'd created were these diploma programs that the average rate at the time was about $7,000, $7,000. I charged $35.
Yep.
But at the end of it, when they finished their course, they got their course, a website, financial advice, property advice, marketing plan, all these things, because I bought all these businesses to create a professional services department store. So that was a one-stop shop for a business and created it all. And that was amazing. We had some great wins, some great successes. We celebrated hugely.
So for those people listening to this podcast that don't know what an RTO is, because I had to look it up when I read through you, but I know now.
Sorry.
So just explain that.
Registered training organisation. It's an education company here in Australia, and it's if you think about what you do at school, you leave school, you can go to university, but this thing in the middle where you can do Cert 1, 2, 3, 4 to diplomas to advanced diplomas. That's the space we hung out in. to be authorised to deliver those courses, there's an enormous accreditation process and an overwhelming amount of compliance in running.
For good reason.
For absolutely good reasons. And, you know, people think of us as TAFE.
Yep.
So TAFE is the free government registered training organisation, but your traditional RTO, registered training organisation, is a privately owned business that is authorised to deliver various qualifications.
And if I can back just one step as well, you talked about your little business, filling the gaps for the bigger business, and that was you again when you were 18, ringing the branches, wasn't it? It was exactly the same, you know.
Exactly.
And you said that was a lesson that you lived, that you learnt and followed through with.
Exactly.
And it's exactly where you are today again.
Yeah. So that success was the foundation piece of that was understanding what you need to do when you partner with someone, and it's a really important business strategy. Why wouldn't you want to partner with your competitors or people who deliver something to your audience? And the things that I know is you got to make it easy. You got to be really clear with your communication. You need to give them access. You also may need to give them control to begin with, but when you give them access and confidence, that control, then you can go back to them and say, actually, I'm taking back that control now because I've demonstrated that what I said I was going to do, I did. So I had all those things ready, and I was one of the first RTOs to be fully automated. So we were paperless, completely paperless, and I had teams of people on calls, and it was an amazing experience. But you know, in 2016, we ended up liquidating it, which was that was one of the hardest days in my business life ever. And that came about because of a number of perfect storm events. I had some staff committing fraud, redirecting invoices to their bank account. I had government legislation change in regards to the funding. I had a partner whose global owner got very nervous of what was going on in Australia in the vet sector, and he got instructed to turn off all partnerships. And that was the critical one. He gave me a week's notice that he would be no longer paying my invoices. Wow. And so called a board meeting, and this was early November 2016, and I said, we could muddle along, but I'm not confident that we can survive, and the last thing I want is getting close to Christmas and going, actually we do have to close. That I can't do that to staff. Yep. So we decided early November 2016 that we would call a conference call, no Zooms, it was all on a phone.
Yep.
And I had 100 people on the phone, and that was a really hard conversation to say that as of today we are closing the doors. And by that point we were an unlisted public company here in Australia, which has enormous compliance, and it literally took 5-6 years to unwind that. It took a long, long time to do that. But there was a beautiful lesson on that day in that I said to them, I have 4 offices and I'd actually like to be able to sell the furniture before the liquidators come in.
Yep.
Who would be prepared to stay and move the furniture? 99% of them stayed on no pay. And that gives me goosebumps today.
I know, it's just because I'm feeling it too.
And I went, oh my gosh, wow, I had no sense of the impact that you can have as a leader in a business. An enormous lesson for me. Like every morning I will walk through the office and say hello. It was just something that I did. And I didn't realise the impact that would have on my team. Like it chokes me up even today. It's beautiful.
It's a special thing, isn't it?
It is. And a bunch of them came up to me. I went up to my office and tears, all that sort of stuff. And this fellow handed me a card. And he said, we'd already bought this card yesterday, but because we knew you were going through some tough times, Joanne, we wanted to give you this card as a support to say we're here for you. We will do whatever we can. And they said, it's sort of mute now, but we want you to have it. And we're still here for you. And today, some of them are still good friends.
It's an amazing story that I'm feeling the energy in the room from that story alone, because you built loyalty through these people and you didn't even know.
I had no idea.
And that's a testament to obviously that you were doing the right thing by the people, by your people, and your team.
Yes.
So fast forward, I guess 6 years from that day, and you're back in business again. You're doing something which is incredible. So was that just another incarnation of Joanne?
It was indeed. Like I went and got a job. That was what I had to do. I was on a fetal position on the floor for about 10 minutes.
Yep.
By that point, my husband's retired, so Paul. So I needed to go and get a job. I went and did that. But a fellow that I'd known for a number of years while I was building my business, we'd been in a networking group together, a consummate business owner Nick Barnsdale here on the Gold Coast, an amazing friend and business mentor. And he said to me, Joanne, I've got a desire to create a business where we help business owners not to become for failure in business. You know how to create programs. You know how to educate adults. You've learned a lot in business. So have I. He's been in business since 16. So how about we start a business, and we came up with Navig8 Biz, and we did that. And our remit, as I said, was to reduce the failure rate of business ownership, and really just to share our collective 50 years in business, 100 million turnover, 40 industries, 12 countries, and give them business without BS, and just share what we've learnt, because business ownership will always be hard. I will never say that I'm going to make it easy, but let's smooth out those big peaks and troughs to be less onerous, and learn from the lessons of what we've been through to make it smoother.
So in a few weeks, we're going to get together for episode 2 in this series,
talk about
and we'll talk about Navig8, because it is an amazing system, or not system, an amazing program that you've developed there, and people can go and look at the Navig8 website and see that for themselves. Look, can you believe we've gone from 20 plus minutes already?
So
it
fast.
goes so quickly.
Thank you.
I want to wrap this up.
Yes.
You talk about mentors.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the answer to this, and I don't like asking questions and I'm completely unaware of what's going to come next. But how many different mentors have you had, and how many do you have now?
Look, I would say to you, over the years I've had at least half a dozen, at least.
Mm-hmm.
But think about mentors as people that you might listen to their podcasts, read their books, physical people. The man who put me, Wayne, he's lovely, and he literally lives and works 10 minutes from my home even today. But I would say to you that today I have at least half a dozen people that I know I can pick up the phone and say, hey, Nick's one of them, business owner in Navig8. More story about that, of course, but you can never have enough, because there are people who are experts in life, finance, accounting, law, business structures, scalability, marketing. There's just so many. And this is not to overwhelm the people who are listening to this. This is to give them the confidence, go, oh my gosh, I can get a buffet of mentors and coaches to help me. And they can be formal and they can be informal.
I'm so glad that's the way the answer went, because that's what I was hoping for, because I was pretty sure that and what a lot of people don't realise is that there are people out there. You mentioned that your team were there behind you the whole time, that you didn't even realise. No. But there are people that we can touch and grab and feel, and it doesn't need to be the same one.
No,
which is really exciting. Let's finish it on one thing. I want to know, Joanne Brooks, what gets her up in the morning, punching the air, going, this is going to be a great day? What's the motivation?
The motivation for me today, my driver, my why, ultimately is I know fully what success looks like for me. Success for me looks like a new home for Paul and I, because we lost our home 6 years ago. It's having the confidence to know that I'm going to impact somebody today. I have these conversations literally daily, and it gives me, whilst some of those conversations are hard, as you heard some emotion earlier on, it keeps me connected and grounded. And I fundamentally know that what I have learnt over my years of being around on this earth, I have something to share, and my story is worth telling. I believe in that. And it's not an ego thing. It is something that I genuinely know. I get told constantly, the way you say it, Joanne, it's absorbable. We can take it on board. It's not scary. And I'm willing to share it. I know if I can serve others, what I'm searching for will come back to me in spades.
It's a long way from the girl in the cupboard, isn't it?
Indeed.
So, look, Joanne, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Entrepreneur, wife, mother, and authentic businesswoman. It has been an absolute pleasure for the last 25 minutes to have a chat to you. And I can't wait now for episode 2. So
I'm
we'll see
excited.
you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne.
Thanks for listening to the My Business Podcast, brought to you by Media8 on the Podfire platform. If you want to be on our podcast, please reach out to the team on all our socials at mybusiness.pod.